The purpose of conducting a needs assessment is to determine whether or not we need training, if a company needs training, if that is what is missing here, and if that will make a difference. When we do that, we actually analyze the organization, the people, and the task involved to determine what is the best way to proceed. Companies are focused on that bottom line. They want to make money. Anything that doesn't make them money, they're going to question. And as we talked about before, training and development is a perfect example. Companies don't mind investing in their employees if there will be a return at some point. And if they're going to develop these training and development programs, they want to make sure that they are going to be beneficial and actually accomplish the goal they set forth. So the first thing they do is conduct a needs assessment to make sure that that training is necessary. Because it could be that it's not a training issue, but more of a performance issue. And if your employees don't actually have the ability to do that or the skills to do that, you can give them all the training in the world and it may not solve that problem. If I could get a group of 10 or 20 people together and we could train all we want, we're still not going to beat the Kansas City Royals in a baseball game. So that would just be money wasted and it wouldn't solve the problem. At the same time, as companies are developing these programs, they need to make sure that the content aligns with what they're trying to accomplish, the objectives and the methods all align with what they're trying to do. And if those aren't there, again, that training is not going to be effective. And then finally, we need to be aware of what our trainees come in with. They may not have the basic skills, the prerequisite skills, or the confidence needed to learn. Obviously, with our group of guys that I assembled, we probably don't have the skills, definitely not the prerequisite skills, and probably the confidence to beat the Kansas City Royals. So in that situation, we need to step back and think of other alternatives, and the training and development is not going to help us beat the Kansas City Royals. There is no universal technique that is used when conducting a needs assessment. All of these have their own strengths and weaknesses and may fit in a certain situation and may not be beneficial in others. The book does a really good job of going over each of those and talking about how the strengths and weaknesses and how each one can be used. So let's look at an observation. I think in education we'll have people come in to observe our classroom, where you will observe a job to see what is going on. It gives you a good idea of what that job actually entails and what that employee is doing. You also have questionnaires, which again, it can be inexpensive, but as you guys know, you guys take questionnaires at the end of each semester about the class and how well the class went, and how much time do you truly put in those, and how much do you really think about what you're writing and how valuable that is. So it may be inexpensive, but it may lack that detail. You also have interviews, and that's a good way to sit down and truly uncover what's going on in a company and what's going on with that job. The problem with that is it is very time consuming, and if you are being interviewed, how likely are you to truly be honest? If you think back to the movie The Office, where they would bring in each individual and talk to them a little bit, how many of those people were honest and how many of those people were trying either to protect themselves or protect their job or protect someone else. So it is another option. You have focus groups, which you can use, and what you do, it's good with complex or controversial issues. Sometimes when you get a group together, they really work well together and they can answer questions together at the same time. It can be time consuming, and you can sometimes get more information than you truly want. You also can document what's going on. It's a good source. It's a good resource for procedures. It can be objective. The problem with this is if I am out, watching a job that I am not familiar with, I can document what I want, but I may not understand some of the technical jargon with that. You also have online technology. It can minimize the work time that's taken away, because people can do it when they have a free minute, go online and do it. Is this effective? It can be scary for some employees, as we've talked about with those generational issues. People may not be up to date on that technology and may not be comfortable using that. And the last one is looking at historical data and looking at what's been done previously. I included teacher evaluations in here because when we're determining what kind of needs assessment we do, we may look at the teacher evaluations and see what has been done and what needs to be done in the future. So once we've gone through this process, what outcomes are we really looking for? Number one, we want to know what the trainees need to learn. What do they need to learn? What's important for this job? Also, who is going to receive this training? And then what is the appropriate method for delivering this? If you are dealing with employees out on a factory floor, it's going to be different than if you're dealing with people that sit in front of a computer all day, or someone who has to deal with customers on a daily basis. So each scenario is going to be different, and that method needs to align with that. How often are you going to have this training? Once a week? Once a month? How often is that going to occur? And should we outsource it, or should we create the actual training program? And then are there other options maybe that we could do? Could we redesign the job? What other options are available before we implement this program? Then how are we going to evaluate it? How are we going to determine whether or not this training program was actually effective? And then how are we going to facilitate the transfer of training? How are we going to take what that individual learned in a training session and ensure that it's actually going to apply to what they're doing? So that's what we are hoping to get out of this. Here is the needs assessment process model pulled straight from your book, and it has the three components. You have the organizational analysis, the person analysis, and the task analysis. Companies would like to gain knowledge from all three of those before they actually make a decision of what they're doing. So it usually starts off with the organization analysis. Does this training align with the company's strategy and direction? And also, does everybody support this training? Again, everybody has to have buy-in in order for this to be effective. I'm sure we've all been in situations where management, for whatever reason, didn't necessarily buy into the actual training and did not believe it was beneficial, and thought it took their employees off the floor and reduced the productivity. And then also we need to think about the resources. Is there time for us to accomplish this? Is there time to fit this into the day? And also, do we have the money for it? Do we have a budget that can allow us to do this? Next, you go into the person and the task analysis, and these are usually done together. And the whole point of that is to determine whether or not it is a performance issue or a task issue, and then we can go from there. With the person analysis, we're looking at that person characteristics, the characteristics of that employee on that job, and trying to determine whether or not it is a performance issue or if it is a task issue. So when we do that, we look at their basic skills and make sure that everything aligns with the job and there are no issues there. Then we look at the inputs. Do they understand the job? Do they understand what the job requires? Also, are they given the opportunity to perform? I'm sure some of you could speak to the fact that you've been at a job before where people would say maybe you didn't do the best job, but it was because your manager may not have allowed you to actually do what you're supposed to do, or somebody was always getting in your way and limiting your effectiveness. So that's something we look for in the input. Then in output, we look for what are the expectations for learning and performance. What are we looking at there? Then we go into the consequences. What are the benefits? What are the rewards from a person performance perspective? And then feedback. Do we receive feedback? If we do something wrong, are we being told this is what we should do correctly? So after we look at that person analysis, we should know if it is a performance issue, and if it is, then maybe we need a different employee in that position, maybe we need different management in that position, but we can address it there. At the same time we're doing the person analysis, we're also doing that task analysis where we're actually looking at the task and we're identifying the important tasks, important knowledge, skills, and behaviors associated with that task. Think about your current position, and if you had to write out what was needed to complete your task, what would you have to actually write out, and what needs to be included at? What knowledge, what skill, what ability, what personal capability or competency is required to actually compete or complete that job? And that's what we're trying to identify in the task analysis. There are a few things we need to consider when doing a task analysis. Number one, we need to analyze what the employees are actually doing and what they should be doing on that particular job. We should also need to break that job down into duties and tasks. If you think about your job, how many duties and tasks are composed of your job, and to break it down and identify where training may be necessary within those. You should use more than one method for collecting information. That way your results are more valid. You need to have someone who truly knows that job and does it and has experience doing that. Here at the School of Business, we just got brand new AC and heating units in each of the offices. Now, if I was going to do a task analysis on that, I'd have no idea what was important and what needed to be done. Whereas if I asked someone who was working on these, I'm sure they could easily break it down. So it is important to have an expert who knows the job and knows what is going to be expected out of that job. So those are all things we need to consider as we do that task analysis. Once we have collected all that knowledge, then we can actually come up with our training and development method, look at different evaluation techniques, think about our learning environment. Are we better to learn in the actual learning environment where they're doing the task? Are we better to take them to a room? Are we better to have it online? And then also, how are we going to ensure that what they are learning in these training sessions actually transfers to their job? When analyzing different jobs, companies also create a competency model to help assist in that process. And what a competency model is going to do, it's going to identify the competencies necessary for each job. What skills, what abilities, what knowledge are required for that. And here's a process they like to do. Again, we start at the top and you conduct your business and strategy analysis. Then you identify the jobs, positions of jobs and families. You conduct interviews and focus groups with top performers to get an understanding of what that job entails. And then you develop those competencies and a competency model based off that, and you validate and review that model. So think when you're applying for a job and they may list the competencies for that job. What they've done is some type of a competency model and actually gone through and identified what competencies are necessary to be successful in that position. As we wrap this chapter up on needs assessment, I hope you guys realize the value of a needs assessment and how important it is when starting off. If you don't conduct that needs assessment, you're kind of going into it blindly and you really don't know what needs training, who needs training, and how to go about creating an effective training program. Now, I'm sure we're all thinking that a needs assessment is important, but it can be very time consuming and very expensive to do. So what other options are available? Well, you can do a rapid needs assessment. The important thing with this is you have to have all your ducks aligned. You have to be ready to go. You have to have experts that you can rely on and count on to give you a good understanding of what the needs are. Plus, it is important to have the technology there to support it. It's a lot easier to send out an electronic survey as compared to actually going around and collecting that data. So there are methods available and it is an option. But when doing that rapid needs assessment, you don't want to cut corners and you want to take your time still and make sure that you truly find out what the needs are for that training and development program.